Recently, I saw a video about a reviewer who was talking about the lowest rated books that they've read on GoodReads. So I thought, well, I've read quite a few books this last year and some of them are quite low rated on GoodReads. So I thought, oh, I could probably do the same. So let's dig in. So the reviewer had mentioned that a pretty low score for books would be anything that's below a 4-star. I've read so many books that are below 4-star. I'm only gonna limit the books to the even lowest, the lowest rated books, because otherwise this video would be like super duper long. So we'll start with the very first low rated book, and it was Nick. Now Nick, that was one of the books that was on my 2021 most anticipated reads list. And it's supposed to be the prequel to The Great Gatsby. Now, F. Scott Fitzgerald was the original, well, he is the author of The Great Gatsby. Sadly, he's passed on. The new author for Nick is somebody new. So I rated this 1 star. I was extremely disappointed. So with The Great Gatsby, we have Nick as the narrator, but Gatsby, he is one of the most hopeful people around, and he's extraordinary, and he is really falling for Daisy. He has this nostalgic hope that he really wants to go back in time, and Daisy has this very special quality where her voice sounds like money and people lean in to listen to her. So we know that we have 2 extraordinary people involved. However, in Nick, which is the prequel, Gatsby is not there. So Nick is just aloof, detached, unemotional. This does not make for a good book. So it didn't have that charm and beauty of The Great Gatsby.
Is all this made entirely from your own imagination?
No. See, you were there all along. And every idea, every decision.
So I was really disappointed with it. I did not connect well with this book. I personally do not connect well with any book where the narrator is really aloof and detached. The second book that we have, I rated this 3 stars. This was People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. This was one of my book of the month picks. And I rated it a 3, and I guess most people kind of rated it similar because it was 3.34. I thought it started off really, really strong. I thought it was funny, but then it quickly went downhill and then just, ugh. It was kind of a mystery, but in the end, like, it didn't even make sense. It did not make sense. I have like a whole dedicated video. Most of these I have dedicated videos because I just like, oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. I thought it would have been great to discuss in a book club because they do talk, it does follow the story of Emmy, which is this Insta mom who's on social media, puts her life out there and kind of gets her into trouble because somebody tracks her down, doesn't really like the advice she gave. And her kids are kind of wrapped up in everything, putting her family in danger. Not one of the characters is likable, so you don't really care if something bad happens to them. So I thought it started strong, it ended poorly. It was disorganized in terms of, was it a thriller? Was it just a fiction? And the 2 didn't mix very well because you would have just the regular chapters and then you have the stalker have a page like randomly after 100 pages. It was very strange. The third book, 3.36 stars, The Removed. I rated this 5 stars. I don't know why people didn't like this book because I loved it so much. It stirred me, it spoke to me. This was a book about, there's a family who's been going through some struggles. They had a son named Ray Ray who was killed by the police. This is a fictional Native American story. And this 15-year-old Ray Ray was killed by the police, and all of the family members have really struggled over the years to cope with this loss. Every year they have this annual bonfire. They're getting ready to go to it, and we check in with several members of the family and see how they're doing. I thought it was so moving. It really spoke to me. I really enjoyed it. I guess some people didn't enjoy it that much. There's a little bit of mythology kind of mixed in with a little bit of surrealism, but not too much, and a little bit of fantasy, and it wasn't super clear what's happening, but I like that as a reader. I like sometimes that it's ambiguous in fiction. If it's a mystery, I don't like it ambiguous, just to be clear. If it's a mystery, I don't like it ambiguous. But if it's a fiction, I like to be able to draw my own conclusions as a reader and feel proud of, oh, I figured it out. I figured out the ending. I like that. I know some people want it to be more literal, so I can see where some people would disagree with me, but I loved it. I loved it. This was also featured in Book of the Month. This one cracks me up so hard. What would Frida do? I gave this a 1 star. And I have like the most liked review. I guess that's my claim to fame. It's my most liked review that I've had, and it's the most liked review for this book. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what would Frida do? I don't know that much about Frida Kahlo. I've seen some of her artwork because when I was in New York, I went to MoMA, and there's quite a few of her paintings there, and I've enjoyed hearing about her sporadically throughout the years, and I wanted to learn more. Sadly, this book just did not contain a lot of facts. The facts that were in there were just regurgitated over and over and over. And unfortunately, the writing just was not very developed. The author would talk about things like, I would dress up as Frida Kahlo for Halloween and all my friends were staring at me. Like, who cares? I mean, I'm sure this author is a really nice person, but the reason I picked this up was because I wanted to know facts about Frida Kahlo, but she didn't really deliver on it. And then the second piece was the self-help piece. The author has absolutely no credentials to offer any self-help advice. I mean, she looks really young. There might be like shoes that I have that are older than she is. She's not a psychologist. She's just a person with an opinion. And the advice was bad. For example, this was one of the little nuggets out of that book. If you need a pick-me-up, drink tequila, but just do so in moderation. Like, why would people even go to AA? They could just read your little disclaimer. Oh, just do so responsibly. Like, yeah, if that worked, nobody would have an alcohol problem. And I find this so incredible that people who are picking up this book, it's titled A Guide to Living Boldly. The only way that you can live boldly is by drinking tequila. I think this book should have been more about how you are enough. You are enough. You shouldn't have to rely on drugs and alcohol to be enough. I was very annoyed. Also, the author would just rattle off a whole bunch of her paintings, but there were no Frida Kahlo paintings in the book. So she would rattle all these things off, and it's like, is the expectation here that I'm supposed to look up all these books? I was super confused. It was just a disorganized, chaotic mess. The next book, 3.44, I rated it a 1 star, The Last to See Her. Oh my gosh, guys. Oh my gosh. I remember picking up this book. And I picked this book up because I think GoodReads had recommended it. It was GoodReads. GoodReads told me, you would like this book. Okay, fine. I picked it up. It was supposed to be a thriller. It wasn't a thriller. It wasn't thrilling. A third of the way into the book, I knew who did it or who was responsible. And by halfway, it was just flat out confirmed who did it. So it's like, how can you have a thriller when you know who did it a third of the way through and you definitely know who did it halfway through? So annoying. The characters did not act believable at all. The police were so unprofessional, sharing information with some of the key witnesses. And the main character, just some of the things that she did, she's supposed to be this famous author. It did not make sense how she would act. I was not a big fan. I did a rant video on this. If you want to see more, other people clearly didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it either. I know I was reading some of my statistics about how I am as a reviewer, and I tend to be more critical, so that makes a lot of sense. If I rate a book 5 stars, it's probably a 6 or a magical category. So take that for what it is. Probably if I rated a 1, it might actually be a 2 by other people's standards, but I don't know. I think they were also saying that the average rating on GoodReads is 4 stars, but 3 stars is supposed to be average. So in my opinion, I feel like my overall average, I think I checked last night, is 3.61 stars, which is actually high if you think the average is 3. So in my opinion, I feel like I'm a generous reviewer. Some of the book reviewing would say that I'm not a generous reviewer. They say that I am very strict. So I don't know. It depends on really, there's no real categorization for these books. The next book, Lydias Oxford, 3.59. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a book written by Philip Pullman. He's my favorite author. I rated this 4 stars, which is pretty, this is 3.59. So most of the people who read this book kind of agree with me. I gave this book 4 stars only because I loved Serpentine. Serpentine, he wrote this other short story and I loved it. Like Loved, loved it. I thought it was super deep. I just was like cuckoo, head over heels in love with that book. And this just wasn't Serpentine. It wasn't that like I'm cuckoo, head over heels in love with this book. I rated it a 4 star. It was fine. One of his books I do not like at all. It's called The Secret Commonwealth. And there are a few references to The Secret Commonwealth in this book. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to not ever think about The Secret Commonwealth because I did not like it. It was too gloomy for me. So I was like, oh gosh, I think that's primarily why I bumped it down to a 4 star. But I was looking at like, why do people not like this book? Because Philip Pullman is a famous author. He has like His Dark Materials featuring Lyra and Pantaleon and the characters in the book. Like they have an HBO series, they've had movies, like it's a very popular series. It's on the 100 list of books to read before you die, according to the BBC. These are very famous books. So why all the hate? This should be like, even when I did like my Secret Commonwealth video, people, just because I don't like it, they're like giving me the thumbs down just because I didn't like it. So I'm like, how can people rate this book so low? And what they didn't like, it is a short story. It is a short story. So they would pay $13 or $14 for this book, and then they're like, I'm gonna give it a low score because it's a short story. Like, I'm confused, guys, because they thought, well, for $13 or $14, I could buy a regular book. But like, this is the genre of the book. It is a short story, so I'm not sure why they're marking it down. If I was rating poetry, I wouldn't say it's poetry, so I'm marking it down. Like, I'm confused, guys. Help me out here. If it's just, I didn't think that the book was worth $13 because it was so short. Okay, I guess I get that. But on the other hand, like, I don't know. I love Lyra. I would pay probably almost anything to get my hands on additional works that involved Lyra and Pantaleon because I thought it was magical and it was wonderful. But to each their own. I appreciate the people who gave it different rating. Girl A, 3.66. I rated this a 4 star, which is pretty consistent with everyone. So this was another book of the month. Man, book of the month is like, has a rough streak. So Girl A, now it was sold as a thriller / mystery. But I didn't think it was a thriller. I didn't think it was a mystery because, okay, the premise of the book is there's this girl, Lex Grace. She was abused by her family, her and a bunch of her siblings. They were abused by her family and she escapes and then they have this new life. So Lex discovers that her mother, who was in prison, has passed away and she's inherited this house of horrors where all this abuse happened. And the story of her meeting with each one of her siblings to decide the fate of the house. The book is told in flashbacks, but it starts off with the escape. I thought that was really brave of this author because most escape or like a captivity type of book, the climax is the escape, right? So she moved it, it was Abigail Dean. She moved it to the front of the book, which I thought was very interesting. I hadn't seen that before and it was very unexpected. But that was like the big key moment was at the beginning of the book. So yes, it was downhill kind of from there. I mean, it wasn't poor the rest of the way, but definitely the first half of the book was much more exciting than the second half of the book. So I do agree with some of these reviewers, and especially if they thought, oh, I'm gonna get some type of mystery, like I wouldn't classify it as a mystery or a thriller. It was interesting. I just don't think it fits very well into the mystery / thriller genre. 3.7, the kindest lie. I rated this 4 stars. I love this. I guess most people agreed with me on this rating. The kindest lie, it involved a couple in Chicago. Ruth Tuttle is a Black professional woman working in Chicago. She has a husband, Xavier, who is a very kind gentleman who would love to start a family with Ruth. However, Ruth has some misgivings because unbeknownst to Xavier, when Ruth was a teenager, she was forced to give up her child for adoption. Now Ruth wants to make amends with the past, so she goes back to her hometown of Indiana and starts looking for answers. While she's there, she meets a troubled young boy named Midnight, and she also discovers that her hometown in Indiana is in the midst of an economic recession and there is very high racial tensions. Personally, I love this book. I feel like a lot of books, when they play it safe, they kind of go down the Hallmark path of everything's wonderful and delightful, and I don't feel that a lot of mothers get a lot of credit for allowing another family to raise their child. To say, for a variety, it could be a variety of different reasons. It could be mental health, it could be drug addiction, but it could be youth, that the mom has to or feels better off leaving their child with another family so that the family can really do right by that child and raise it up in a better environment than the mom thinks that she can provide for the child. I think that's a beautiful gift. When you walk into Hallmark, most of the cards are about, Mom, you did all these great and wonderful things. Thank you for carpooling and driving me around and baking cookies and all these things. There's not a lot of cards that say, thank you, Mom, for doing what's right for me and having my needs before yours and really doing me a beautiful, wonderful thing by putting me up for adoption and giving me to a very loving family. You don't see those cards. So I thought this book was just terrific and really showing that journey and transformation, that adoption is such a beautiful, wonderful thing. So I have a lot of love for this book. Every time I think about it, I smile and I really look forward to reading it again. The next book we have Get 10,000 Twitter Followers, 3.77. I rated this 2-star. There's 13 ratings. So I'm not sure if this person's family or the other reviewers, but this book, it had tips that you could follow. So the tips were essentially these. Find a robot, pay the robot to get tweets and to load them up to Twitter for you. Like, okay, that's cool, but a few things, like, why would I want to subscribe to that? People have been complaining, if you read comments, people will say, oh, you see this fake account, and then they'll show somebody who has this quote that is like a robot that will post the things for you, and it's just a quote. So, like, that's what this author is telling us to do, is to tell us to pay a robot to do that. So I thought, well, this doesn't teach me how to actually get Twitter followers. It doesn't teach me how to get the Twitter followers. It's telling me, well, go hire somebody else to go do it. And when I looked at the quotes, I didn't really like it because although the tweets might have been okay, like if you were just a very general, I want to develop Twitter followers. But for me, my focus is mainly books and reading. So on my Twitter account, I want to focus on books. I would need specific quotes about books. So then it's like, okay, well, I can go in and I would have to research all the quotes that I want about books, and then I'd have to post it. And then in addition, most posts that get the clicks are posts that have pictures. So in addition to getting the quote, I'd also need to get a picture. At which point I'm thinking, why am I paying a bot to do something that now I need to do anyways? So I didn't feel that this book was particularly helpful. I do not recommend it. If you have Twitter tips, how to grow my Twitter page, I'm all ears. Drop me a comment below because I'm still searching for how to grow my Twitter followers. I have been following a bunch of people, but they usually follow you for a day and then they drop you off of theirs and it's just a mess. So I'm only gonna go over, I think, one more book. So this is my favorite book, everyone. I love this book. I love this book. This is my favorite. No, I think this is, I love Dune, so that would be my number one. But my number two, and this one has been my, like, one of my favorite books for like as long as I can remember. It's Walden. I rated this 5 stars. I would give this a 6 star. So again, I'm a tough grader. If it's 5 stars, it's probably 6. But I do know why people have rated this low, 3.78. So Walden, it was written in 1854. This is a whole nother pace of life. It is a nonfiction book. It's about Henry David Thoreau. For about 2 years, he goes out and he lives next to Walden Pond. He lives alone in this really small little 1-bedroom like cottage. And that's where he lives, and he writes and he talks about nature. And the first chapter, which is huge, is like half the book. There are a lot of incredible one-liners. I love it. A lot of quotable quotes, a lot of things well before his time, just almost unimaginable how close he got to some of these predictions in the book. It is really phenomenal. The second half of the book, it focuses a lot more on nature and his time at Walden Pond and what he does to occupy his time. This piece, it really, I don't even know how to describe it. It is boring. I could see where people would say it's boring or slow paced. For me though, when I read this book, it's almost like meditation for my mind. When I read this book, usually when I read this book, it's over many, many, many months. It's kind of like sipping fine wine. So when you need to just relax and you need to think about nature, you're thinking about the wind blowing through the grass. You're thinking about the sun coming through the trees. You're focused on nature in all its glory. You're thinking of the crunch of dirt beneath your boot as you're walking through the forest, things like that. You're really focused. Like for me, I try to clear my mind and focus on the book. It is slower paced. It's not like a thriller, like, oh yeah, I'm turning every page and I just gotta finish this. It is not like that. It is very slow paced, but I think it's very, if you slow down, if you really slow down to the time before the internet, before instant gratification, when you just really focus your mind on that book, I love it. I've read this book half a dozen times. I'm going to read it a half a dozen times more plus. I so enjoy it. So with that, if you gave this book 1 star, try to give it another go. Try not to read it, like cram it. Because when I did read it over 2 days, I'm like, this is not very good. Usually I do read it over a long period of time and I sip it like a fine wine to be enjoyed. So if you read Walden, you didn't like it, try to read it again. I feel like I can take different things from it at every year and every age. Every time I read it, I feel like I get something else. So give it another shot. Let me know in the comments what books you read off of GoodReads that are the lowest rated. Do you agree with those ratings? Do you disagree with those ratings? If you believe that books create ideas and ideas change the world, let's change the world one book at a time. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I'm Lisa of Troy. Peace.